What's your biggest, this isn't what it looks like moment? I used to take my kids to different playgrounds as they were growing up. Oftentimes, I'd be out there with them, chasing them, being the random monster, dragon, antagonist while they run away, and then eventually they turn around and chase me back. Inevitably, since the rest of the parents were on their iPhones or doing anything but interacting with their kids, I'd end up with a collection of who wanted to join in on the fun. It was all going well until they said they wanted to play Minecraft. So a group of kids suddenly scatter from where I'm standing, yelling, "Ah, run away from the creeper, ah!" I look up to see a line of parents suddenly jostled back into consciousness with absolutely no frigging context whatsoever. Yeah, you should have run at the parents while screaming, "Tss." Story 2. I went to my friend's house last night and came back around 12:30 a.m. To set some context, my friend lives about an hour away from me on the opposite side of the city. So when I was driving back home afterwards, this car cut me off on the ramp and I honked at them. I then turned back up the music and pretty much drove home on autopilot, but when I got off the freeway at my exit, I realized that the same car that had cut me off was in front of me. After that, I got kind of curious because it had been already like 30 minutes since the incident, and we'd changed freeways twice already. I then got a little bit worried that they'd think I was following them home, but I didn't think too much of it until the car started going up the same side streets that I did. Eventually, I realized that my 16-year-old neighbor who had just learned how to drive cut me off, and she and her friends were probably now petrified that some lunatic was following them home. I guess she'd called her parents in the meantime because she pulled into her driveway and the house lights were all lit up, and her dad, a huge guy, was standing outside with a baseball bat. I then pulled into my own garage and apologized for scaring them, and it was all chill after that. Story 3. It was my third day at my new office job. When I washed my hands, my pants touched the countertop, which was covered with water. Naturally, I now looked like I wet myself and had a giant 6x6 soaked area. I couldn't walk around with that, so I thought about using the hand dryer, like in the movies. However, the hand dryer was the type that you stick your hands in rather than under. So I line up and basically mount this hand dryer like I'm looking for a good time. I look at myself in the mirror, and as I start thinking, this won't look good if, and of course the CIO walks in. Before I could finish the thought and react, he looks at me and says, "Do I need to call HR?" To which I responded, No, it's consensual. We had a good laugh about it, and he never let me forget that moment. Story 4. Alright, so, as a student, when I visited my hometown, I got to visit my grandma before leaving back to university, and my grandma always had small chocolates for people visiting her. Her grandchildren would get more than one, usually. As I was leaving the house, she gave me one more to have during the trip back home. I ate a piece of chocolate while loading my stuff in the car, and I put the small chocolate in my back pocket right before I said goodbye to my parents. It was a hot day at the end of the summer. A bit before the exit to the highway I was taking, I stopped at a traffic light and realized that the chocolate between my back and my car seat was not a good idea, so I'm reaching for it. Chocolate already melted and the package already open made my left hand full of melted chocolate. Following the loud, "well, crap," I realized that the girl in the car next to me just saw a guy reaching for his back and bringing his hand up again full of brown, unknown, sticky stuff. The look on her face was totally worth it. Only bad thing is that melted chocolate won't go away with only tissues. Story 5. I was 16 and my parents just left the house for a dinner out. I had to do laundry, so I started right after they left the door to get it done and as early as possible. As I'm filling the machine, I notice a stain on my shirt, and so I put it with the rest of the clothes. I also look at my pants and decide to add them as well, along with my socks, and screw it, my garments as well. So I'm bare and I start the machine. I rush to the stairs to get to my room and dress up, and that's when the front door, which is right where the stairs are, opens and I freeze. My dad comes in and sees me, bare. We both aren't moving for a few seconds, and then he laughs, grabs his wallet on the table, and says, "So that's what you're doing while we aren't here?" He then closes the door while giggling. I'm there, still in shock and red as a beet. I rush to dress and call my parents on my mother's cell phone to tell them it's not what they think, as they are just laughing their backs off. Story 6. Not me, but a kid I worked with. He comes into the break room holding some sandwiches and a Dr. Pepper, sits down and starts eating and then tries to have a drink, but he can't open it. I offer to twist the lid off, but no, he can do it, he says. So he puts his Dr. Pepper in between his legs, grabs the lid with both hands, and twists. This obviously wasn't a bright idea. It explodes over his lap, making him look like he whizzed himself. So he goes to the bathroom to clean up, gets some loo roll, and starts mopping up, but it still looks pretty bad. Over by the radiator is a hand dryer, so in his infinite wisdom, he puts one foot on top of the radiator and angles his area to the hand dryer and starts rubbing furiously as the hand dryer's going. Unluckily for him, he's facing away from the door, so when the next guy walks in, all he can see is this skinny dude rubbing his area like no tomorrow while waving it under the hand dryer. Apparently, the guy just walked right back out after muttering a sorry. He didn't find it funny when I pointed out the Dr. Pepper motto was, "What's the worst that can happen?" Wait, I didn't know Dr. Pepper had a motto. What's the worst that can happen? There's the answer. Story 7. I used to work security reception at my company, so I greeted everyone when they came in the door and made sure they were wearing their security badge. You could either wear your badge on a lanyard around your neck or on a retractable belt clip. So I've been doing this job for like 2 years when I'm outside talking to some of the girls that work on the second floor. One of them just flat out asks why I always check out women when they come in to visit. Excuse me? Turns out there was a lot of talk about how I was looking women up and down when they came through the door. Well, I was looking everyone up and down. I would look at their chest first, and if there was no badge there, my eyes would move to their belt. It was kind of my job and stuff, you know? Story 8. My best friend of 15 whole years, Jay, is a guy, and with me being a girl, we have always endured people assuming we have to have intimacy. Spoiler, we don't. Anyways, we were camping with a few friends and got supremely intoxicated. One of my girlfriends, M, has taken off into the woods after a fight with her boyfriend, and the 4 of us are trying to find her. At this point, I'm so full of tequila, I know I'm about to retch, so I ask my best friend to hold my hair back. We are in complete darkness. He's awkwardly standing in front of me, kind of crouched down, because he's like a whole foot taller than me, and holding all my hair up while I heave. It looked, well, I know how it looked, but all my life I was getting sick. At this exact moment, M runs out of the woods, flashlights directly on us, and screams, "Holy crap, she's whistling him." I'm legit retching so hard I don't even hear her. By the time we got back to the campfire, M had told everyone what she saw. She's still adamant to this day that she knows what she saw. Story 9. I'll preface this by saying a couple of weeks prior to this, my wife had bought some frilly garments on clearance sale and a couple of bananas to eat on the way to work. I was chilling in the car at the store while she went in when I smelled nasty overripe bananas. I reached into the back seat and pulled out the bag that had been forgotten back there. I take the garments out of the bag and tie the old banana. No big deal, right? For whatever reason, my brain goes, I wonder if these brand new garments now reek of old squishy bananas. And I put them to my nose and take a big whiff, right as a sweet old lady pulls into the parking spot in front of our car. She looks at me, garments pressed into my nose, inhaling deeply. Her eyes go wide with shock and visibly shaking. She pulls back out of the spot and drives away, literally leaves. Shopping trip canceled. I know I had to look like some kind of degenerate perv on a public minge binge, but it wasn't what it looked like, I swear. Story 10. Before mobile phones, around 1992, I was a soldier in Germany stationed in a university city. I had a German girlfriend. I was away training at Graf and had spoken with her on the phone, and she said she was going to the disco that night with a friend. As luck had it, I was offered a chance to go back home early. There was no way to contact her. She wasn't at home, and that's how it was back then. So I figured I'd go down to the disco and try to find her. When I got there, she was dancing with some guy I knew to be a cook in our unit. I watched long enough to see they were just dancing, nothing going on, and then decided to just let her be, and I walked down to a nearby pub, had a beer, and came back when I knew the disco was closing. Well, as I stood outside waiting, the cook she was dancing with came out with his buddy, and they almost immediately managed to get into a fight with a group of Turks who were hanging out in the parking lot. One of them broke a bottle on the cook's head. I broke the fight up and separated the two belligerents. Then I took the cook by the head so I could examine his wounds. And by this time, my GF came out of the disco with her friend and saw me holding this guy, wounds all over his face and on my hands. She ran up screaming at me that I couldn't just mess somebody up for dancing with her. Story 11. Aw man, sitting at a traffic light when I was 18, wanted to get something out of my pocket, Chapstick I think. I was wearing jeans that, when sitting, might as well have locked pockets. I keep my eyes forward so I can see if the light turns green while I dig into my pocket. Have to kind of thrust my hips upwards and move a bit to reach my hand fully into my jeans. During my guy rating pocket quest, I make eye contact with a girl crossing the crosswalk. I'm a guy. A look of horror crosses her face as she says something to her friend. The other girl gives me a disgusted look as well, and they hurry across the crosswalk. I'm sure it looked pretty bad from their perspective. Story 12. My friend and I got super spiked in high school and were laying on the floor of my computer room listening to I Feel Like Dying by Lil Wayne. We hear the garage door start to go up and go into an all-out panic. There would be no way to fool anyone that we weren't spiked. We came up with a brilliant idea to take off our uniform pants, Catholic school, and jump into my bunk beds and pretend we were sleeping. My mom makes her way upstairs and casually opens the door. I immediately darted up and said, "Hi, Mom, we were just taking a nap." She smiles, nods, and closes the door. Years later, I found out that my mom thought we were experimenting with each other, not substance. She apparently called my uncle, who is gay, immediately after leaving the room and asked if he thought I was gay. Pretty funny stuff that my family brings up repeatedly to this day. Once I told my mom we were spiked, it made a lot more sense to her. Story 13. My boyfriend and I had a fight and both went to bed grumpily. We were housemates and had separate bedrooms. In the middle of the night, I heard a loud thump in the living room area of the house. I grabbed my baseball bat and went through the whole house with the bat and the lights on. Every closet, every cupboard, etc. Nothing was out of order and the doors were locked. I still was spooked and running high on adrenaline. It was about 4:30 in the morning and I had to get up at 6, so I just gave up on going back to sleep before that. I debated what to do for an hour and a half and decided to go to IHOP, open 24 hours where I live. As I was about to leave, I realized that if I left my sleeping boyfriend in the house and the criminal was actually still there and ended him, I would feel extremely guilty. So I went to wake him up just enough to warn him before I left for IHOP. He woke up to me leaning over his bed, holding a bat and whispering about termination. He almost cried. Story 14. Went to a friend's house, and since it was an after party for a play in high school on a Friday, of course there was beer. I wasn't drinking, but a buddy of mine needed to go home, so I dropped him off and headed back. As I got out of the car, when I got back, I noticed it was quiet, but it's a huge house, like 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, and I figured they were in the basement doing something quieter and I couldn't hear them. Front door locked. Okay, I was just here 15 minutes ago. Head to the back door, unlocked. Awesome, now the entire house was beeping as if someone was breaking in. Holy crap, that's this house right here. Oh crap, that's me. Run into the basement, nobody there. Upstairs, nobody there. Kitchen, lights off. Start to hear the house phone ring, but I don't answer and I know it's too late. Call friend, no answer. Call another friend, no answer. See beer cans everywhere, so I cleaned them up and hid them, hid the brownies they had, checked around the house one more time for stuff, and waited for my inevitable demise. Friends call me back as I'm outside freaking the heck out, and they start to rush home. Long story short, the cops showed up with 2 dogs and weapons, pointed at me, and I got slammed to the ground and handcuffed. Friends arrived at home and explained situation just in time before I'm hauled off. They decided to run out to eat at the exact convenient time I left, never told me, and left the back door unlocked with the house alarm armed. That was one heck of a night. Ha, yeah, right, the best part, he spent the entire ordeal cleaning up after their party. Story 15. After I got my license, I used to just go out for random drives in the middle of the night to enjoy my freedom because the repetitive grind of adulthood had not yet crushed my enthusiasm for life. I was cruising through a really nice community around 2 a.m. when suddenly a cop comes out of nowhere and pulls me over. He asks what I'm doing, and I tell him I'm just out for a drive. He informs me that there has been a rash of car stereo thefts in the area. Now, earlier that day, a friend had given me a very nice car stereo, amp, and CD change that I was planning to install. So they were all piled in my backseat, wires hanging all over the place, along with the tools I had borrowed from my dad to do the job. Of course, he spies through all of this through the rear window with his flashlight and questions me. I nervously gave him my explanation and he went back to his cruiser for a bit, then came back and left me off with a smile. I'm assuming that once he pulled out my record and saw I was 16 years old with no previous infractions, he assumed my story was true, or I was an extremely professional and ambitious car stereo thief. Thankfully, it was the former. Story 16. A coworker that I ran into at a wedding got really intoxicated and tried to recruit me into helping him and his ex-girlfriend and her new boy, who were also coworkers of mine. His whole plan was for me to inquire the next day at work whether they would be at a party later in the week, and to text him if they were so he could ambush them when they tried to leave. Dude went into creepy detail about how he was going to shoot them in the knees first so they'd have to beg for their lives from the ground. I played along like, sure, whatever, man, and gave him some space. The next day at work, I reported the incident to HR and called the police. I work for a Fortune 500 company, so our corporate security called me at my desk and asked me to go into a private room with my cell and call them back so we could discuss how to help them assess the threat level to the office. There was only one private room in that office, a long conference room with big windows and a long table. The lights were out, but the windows provided plenty of light. I noticed an open laptop on the conference table, but it wasn't on, and since the lights were out, I didn't think much of it. I was on the phone with corporate security for maybe 10 minutes, and the department head, the super butch woman who looks and acts like Jane Lynch, walks in with the head of an even larger department. They had been using the room for a meeting and had stepped away to do something, and they both walked in to find me huddled in the corner on my cell phone with the lights out, instead of at my desk taking phone calls. She had always hated me, so I knew it was pointless, but I managed to get out, "Sorry, I'm on the phone with corporate security because," and she barked, "I don't care. Leave." Never got an apology or anything even after the dude was fired, and it seemed to only increase her hatred for me. No good deed goes unpunished, I guess. Story 17. Not me directly, but I feel this story is relevant. We just moved into a new house. My older sister, who was about 5 at the time, was refusing to get in the bath, and my mom was throwing the classic, "You wait until your father gets home." After a lot more yelling and mom struggling, we hear dad pull up in the driveway. My sister was so worked up about getting in trouble from dad, she ran straight out of the house, completely bare, to dad's car, screaming repetitively, "No, daddy, no," and continued to run around the front yard screaming. Well, our new neighbors across the street heard her screaming, and when they saw her running around the yard, rushed over to rescue her and started yelling at dad to stay away. My poor dad had no idea what was going on, and mom came out and explained what was actually happening. That family became lifelong friends of ours. Turned out they had a daughter 2 days older than me. We're still best friends, and our families have adopted each other as second families. The neighbor that quote-unquote rescued my sister even emceed my sister's wedding and told that story. The story even still comes up at barbecues despite happening some 30-odd years ago. Story 18. Not what it looks like, but rather not what it sounds like. My mom was physically disabled, severe rheumatoid arthritis in her whole body. She was an excellent mom and fought through pain I cannot comprehend every day to get my brother and me to school and in general have a normal life. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked. Growing up like that, you initially don't know that anything you have is unusual because it's how your life is. It's only when you're exposed to a difference that you realize that what you know isn't how things are for everyone. My younger brother must have had one of these moments because one day over the summer while we were eating lunch, he asked me why our mom walked differently. I was pretty young, maybe 10 or so, but I understood well enough to give him a basic understanding of why she was different. We just finished this discussion when my mom came storming in, furious and hurt, because she'd kinda sorta heard us through the wall. The master bathroom shared a wall with the kitchen, and she thought we were making fun of her condition and get stuck there for most of the rest of the day. Fortunately, I was a generally trustworthy kid, and I was able to explain what the conversation really was when I was finally called back to apologize. I loved my mom and felt awful that she'd think I'd be making fun of her for being different. Definitely my biggest "you're misunderstanding me" moment. Story 19. Not me, but friends. They were newlyweds of 2 different nationalities. The common language wasn't perfect yet, and there was some growing pains, confusion about each other's cultural backgrounds, etc. They had just adopted a puppy. The wife tells the husband that neutering the dog would be a good idea, and he agrees. Later the same day, she takes the pup for a walk. He does his business, and she notices that the dog's mess gets on his fur. So she decides to trim said fur just for the husband to walk down the stairs mid-haircut. Or better, fall down the stairs screaming. He thought she didn't want to wait for the vet. It's been over 10 years, and they are still happily married, and we are still laughing about that story. And if you're enjoying the story so far in this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. Back in 2008, I was working in a crappy job, and it was just the end of the day, Friday, at the end of a particularly long week. As I was packing up to leave, a couple of coworkers, we'll call them Bob and Sarah, were leaving at the same time. We all agreed we needed a drink, so we decided to hit up a happy hour together. We ended up at a gay bar because Bob is, 1, gay, and 2, knew the bartender. It should be noted that Sarah and I, a female, while allies, are both straight, relevant for later. Turns out the bar was having a movie release party, Cosmos and snacks, cool. A little while later, I'm sitting outside on a bed-like couch with Sarah while Bob gets us our next round of drinks. The photographer for the event comes by and casually asks, "Snap our photo," so Sarah and I lean together and smile, snap. They asked for our names, which we assumed was to get prints later or something, so we gave them and thought that was that. Back to happy hour and griping about crappy jobs. Fast forward to Monday morning, we're back in the office, and I see Sarah leave. When she comes back, she slaps a newspaper on my desk, smirk on her face. It's the front page of the culture section, and there's the photo of me and Sarah above the fold with the headline, "The gays come out in celebration of the premiere." The paper definitely outed us as a gay couple. Well, my dad's coworker saw the paper and, since my last name isn't that common, showed the pic to my dad and asked if I was his daughter. I would have paid so much money to see his face at that moment. It made for an interesting conversation with my parents later where they assured me they loved and supported me no matter what. Story 21. My mom hooks rugs, basically a form of art where you pull strips of wool through burlap to create a pattern or a picture, which can then be used as a rug or a tapestry. She playfully referred to herself as a to her friends. In kindergarten, my teacher gave us a project where we talked about what jobs our parents did. I cheerfully told the entire class and teacher that my mom was. The principal called my mom in for a meeting where she had to explain to the administration that she did not sleep with people for money. Story 22. I sprained my ankle quite badly in high school, but didn't want to miss out on the final tournament as I was a senior. Since we were flying to our destination, my doctor prescribed me epinephrine shots to avoid getting an embolism. Not sure of the English term, which I would have to inject in my belly once a day until the return flight. We were hosted in pairs by local families of athletes while the coaches stayed in a hotel. One day, just as we were about to leave for the games, I remembered that I'd forgotten to take my shot in the morning. So I ran back to the room, rummaged around in my bag, fetched a needle, and lifted my shirt. Right at that moment, the mother also walks back upstairs to grab her purse or something, and we made eye contact through the open door, her looking at me as I was injecting the epinephrine. It only took about 2 seconds, but it felt like a hot minute, and I could read all the thoughts going around in her head, portrayed by the variety of facial expressions that she was going through. This is not what it looks like, I can explain. Luckily, I had the prescription and the coaches knew, so they were able to explain why a 17-year-old foreigner was injecting stuff in his body under her roof. Story 23. Once when I was in 8th grade, I was hanging out at a new friend's place for the first time. We were playing chess, and I dropped a piece behind a telescope that was in his room in his house. I had to move the telescope a bit to get to the piece. An hour or so goes by, and his mom comes in furious. I guess the neighbors had a daughter our age. When I moved the telescope, it was inadvertently pointing towards her bedroom window. This kid's mom saw that and thought I was corrupting her son by getting him to spy on our neighbor's girl's bedroom with me. Come on, lady, we just wanted to play some chess. Story 24. Now, I usually do not use my autism as an excuse. I'm sorry, but this one moment was just an autistic moment. I had to get investigated for this. Thankfully, I was proven innocent. First off, to give context, I hated seeing my little stepbrother run around the house bare. I did not want him around me, and it was awful. Second, I wasn't that much of an intimate person, did not see it as that great of a thing, and I found no attraction in people. My relationship with my stepmom is just generally not very strong, so I could see why she would not trust me at all. Finally, I'm not allowed in the parents' room without permission. Of course, my impulsiveness at the time overtook their set boundaries. So I walk out of the bathroom and I see my little stepbrother completely bare on the bed in the master bedroom. He asks me to help him find his swimsuit. At this moment, I saw a win-win situation without even thinking about the rule opposing entering the room. I could help him out and he won't be bare anymore. Sounds good to me. I walk into the room and help searching around. I then ask him to describe the swimsuit. At this point, walking in would look totally really sketchy. I, not paying attention, was looking down at him beside the bed, my stepbrother laying on the bed talking to me. Little did I expect the worst case scenario. My stepmom, who I did not even hear walk up the stairs, walked in and saw this very moment that I was just describing to you. At this point, I came to realize that it happened. I broke a rule and it looked suspicious, very suspicious. I won't go into full detail on what exactly happened next, but I got yelled at, and I now currently live with my mom instead. I still see dad at least once a week, but not so much my stepmom or stepbrothers. I had to be brought to my counselor, who also brought me to somebody who analyzes my behavior, my personality. He came to the conclusion that it seemed very unlikely to do such a thing, and it's a safe thing to say the benefit of the doubt is reliable. I am still affected by this today, but I've learned to get over it and just accept it. Story 25. I was helping a friend dye her hair, and it was time to wash out the dye. Now, the sink in the kitchen doesn't have a sprayer, and the shower head was fixed. I'd started out standing next to the tub but was having a hard time washing the dye out in the tiny bathroom, so I decided to take off my pants and climb into the tub to be able to reach better. I still had garments on, but you couldn't really tell because my shirt hung past them. So there she is, standing bent over the tub, and I have both of my hands on her head working the dye out. Her baby daddy opens the door to the bathroom, sees us, turns bright red, and turns and walks out before we could say a word. Story 26. Let me preface by saying that I was the first graduate student in a brand new lab, so for a while it was just my professor, our lab manager, and myself working in the lab while everything was getting set up. If anyone has ever helped set up a lab, you know that sales reps are constantly coming in and out, trying to make an easy commission grab on the big equipment that labs buy with their startup funding. While I was the only student in the lab, I was trying to put together an outreach module where we would go to a fifth grade class and then have them build a microscope out of Legos using a 3D printed Lego lens adapter. This is what we were going to have them build. At some point, I'm sitting in the lab building this microscope to see how long it would take for the kids. Both my professor and the lab manager are gone buying stuff from a company that had gone out of business when a rep walks in, and I'm just sitting at my bench playing with Legos. She asked if the manager or my professor were around because they have some sweet discounts on pipette tips or something like that, and I had to tell her that they're both out and I could help her. At that point, she just looks at me like, seriously, your bosses are gone and you decide to sit here and play with Legos instead of work? This is what I have to deal with? We sit in silence for a minute before she shakes her head and says that she'll just try back later. I assume my lab now has a reputation at that company as having a grad student that plays with Legos instead of working when nobody's looking. Ah, yes, the joys of scientific research where groundbreaking discoveries are made one Lego brick at a time. Story 27. My best friend, we're both female, stayed over one night for a sleepover, and at some point we were underneath the bed covers pretending it was a tent and telling each other scary stories. My mom walked in on us while I was screaming and pretending to be a ghost, and my friend was giggling at the horrible job I was doing. She turned on the light and had a horrified look in her face that I realized later was because she was fearful of me becoming a lesbian. Story 28. I was in a parked car in the lot of our local baseball stadium. It was family day, and there were lots of tailgating and games for the kids. I was feeding my infant daughter in the driver's seat. I had put a baby blanket in the window to block the sun from her face. Two boys, about 10 and 12, walked past my car and tried to look into the window. I heard them yelling to their dad from outside my blanket-covered window that I was doing substance in the car. I have no idea what made them think that. Their dad, a cop, came over and knocked on the window, demanding that I open up. My husband, who was also a cop, came running over after seeing this big dude knocking on our car. Meanwhile, I had unlatched the baby, covered myself, and rolled down the window. The first cop dad was so embarrassed, and the kids were shouting. I was upset. The baby was squalling with interrupted meal rage, and my hubs was yelling at everyone. Then stadium security showed up. Good times. Story 29. This actually happened yesterday. Super uncomfortable. More of a, this isn't what it sounds like, but our professor was asking us what we thought as children when our parents fought. When he said this, it sparked a specific memory of my dad, probably slightly buzzed, but I was really little, so I took my older, wiser sister's word and was extremely worried that my dad was going to hurt my mom. He obviously didn't and has never and will never hurt my mom, but for some reason this memory popped in my mind even though they weren't even fighting. So my teacher calls on me and asks, what was your what-if moment when your parents fought? And I was taken by surprise, so I answered with the first thing that popped in my mind, which was, what if my dad hurts my mom? I don't think he nor my classmates expected such a morbid answer because he gave me a quick, weird look. But before I could justify what I said, he asked someone else and they had some vanilla, innocent, what if I caused a fight answer? And I just felt a whole lot of shame and worry that my classmates now think my dad hurts my mom, lol. To make matters worse, a few minutes later, he was like, let's take a break. That was some pretty heavy stuff. Talking about family can be surprisingly emotional. He's never given us a break mid-lecture before. Story 30. I was living with this girl. Her and I were super close, but like absolutely 100% platonic. Gender essentially didn't exist as a concept in our friendship, just our connection. So being a boy, girl didn't ever really change the nature of our friendship. So one time we were both home but didn't know the other was. We came in at different times and just kicked it in our respective rooms. I decided I was hungry, so in my garments I went downstairs to get food. As I turn around to leave the kitchen, she walks in wearing nothing but garments. This is not abnormal for us. When I say 100% platonic, I mean it. So normally this encounter would go, oh crap, I didn't know someone was home, with a brief scare, then we'd go about whatever we were already doing. How did it go this time? Her boyfriend rolled in the kitchen sliding door. He found his girlfriend and I in the kitchen just wearing our garments. Thankfully, her boyfriend was one of my good friends and he trusted both of us. Took a bit of explaining for sure, but he eventually realized it was absolutely not what it looked like. Story 31. So I used to get really bad nosebleeds. This particular year, they were especially bad. I knew that I had to get my nose cauterized, but I was lazy and kept putting it off. One day I'm out to breakfast with my wife and my nose starts gushing. It's one of the worst ones I've ever had. I run to the bathroom and I'm just trying to get it under control, but there's mess everywhere. It's on my clothes, all over my face, all over the toilet. I sneeze, and now it's all over the walls too. I had to text my wife and tell her to come help me. Luckily, she's used to this and isn't fazed by the Rambo-level war zone I had turned that bathroom stall into. She gets me cleaned up, but not before taking a photo of the crime scene to use as evidence the next time I try arguing that I don't have a problem. Flash forward to that afternoon, we're at the mall with my mom shopping for boots. We go up to the register, and my wife opens her camera roll to find the coupon she had taken a screenshot of. She hands her phone to the cashier, a sweet, bubbly girl of about 17. The girl's eyes widen with terror and all the color drains from her face immediately. Story 32. I was talking to my coworker a couple of days ago when our boss walked in as I said, "Can you imagine the New Hampshire pregnancy purge?" About some story I read about a law passed somewhere that had to be changed. The law was about termination, and it was about considering it a crime, and there were exceptions to that. So for a couple of days, the imprecise language of that bill said that it was legal for pregnant women to commit crime, and in my head, I imagined the purge, but only pregnant women doing the crimes. It sounded like I wanted pregnant women terminated. My boss already doesn't like me. Story 33. So, in San Antonio back in the early 90s, they had a cable channel designated as public access, and there was a block of programming that could be used by pretty much anyone willing to send in a videotape. Think of it as what people did before YouTube. One show that took advantage of this opportunity called themselves Worst Show. Just a couple of guys trying to be entertaining in various ways, talking at the camera in their living room, going out in the field to shoot random things with a shotgun, playing in their garage band. One time they revealed how to make a bomb with a plastic bottle and aluminum and whatnot and got in serious trouble over that. But instead of toning things down, they spent much of the next episode having little skits where they always found ways of referencing the bomb from the earlier episode. Point is, the show was usually pretty amusing. Well, one evening I was watching the show. It was usually something like midnight when it came on, and for grins, they decided to play a clip of a Yoko Ono music video. During this clip, Yoko Ono was inexplicably screaming. I suppose this is actually not unexpected of her showmanship. Well, lacking any context whatsoever, it sounded exactly like an explicit video. And that was a moment my mother randomly decided to see what I was watching. I'm pretty certain my hasty explanation was not taken seriously. Story 34. I was a voracious reader when I was a kid, and one author I particularly liked wrote novels for kids as well as more adult-themed ones. When I was around 11 or 12, someone lent my mother one of the more adult ones, and I pestered and pestered her to read it. She always said no until you're older. It's not a book for kids. My mom finished the book and lay it forgotten on a corner of her desk until I nabbed it and started to read it in secret. I have to admit, it was pretty racy and I didn't understand a lot of it, but that didn't hold me back. I was going to read this book. One night, I'm lying in bed reading the forbidden novel when suddenly my mother came into the room. I quickly thrust both my hands under my covers and must have had an expression of surprised guilt on my face. My mom gets a strange look on her face, and instead of yelling at me for disobeying her, she gently starts telling me that it is okay, natural, and nothing to be ashamed of. Then it clicks. She hadn't seen the book. She thought she'd walked in on her daughter discovering her womanhood and didn't want me to end up in therapy. Screaming from the sheer cringe of the situation and wanting it to stop, I brought the book out from under the covers. The look of embarrassment on my mom's face was priceless. Story 35. 12-year-old me is in the school gym about to participate in an exam to earn my green belt in karate. It was around this time that my eyesight was deteriorating, but a couple of months before, I would end up with glasses. Sometimes, in order to see things more clearly, I would put my fingers to the corners of my eyes and stretch them, narrowing the focus enough for me to make out the details on the blackboard or whatever. So, I arrive along with some friends and we're just wandering around waiting for things to get started when I look up to see the silhouette of a man standing on a balcony that overlooks the main hall. It is then that I remember that we had invited the founder of the organizations to attend, who had come all the way from Japan and was touring around Europe. This imperious-looking, shadowy figure looks like he might fit the bill, but I'm not certain as he's far away and rather blurry. So I step forwards, crane my neck upwards, and press my fingers to the corners of my eyes. Story 36. I think I've posted this story before. I have a really good friend who does research on human intimacy, specializing in explicit video marketing and production. He was working on a project that involved watching thousands of hours of videos and writing down how often different things happened. Eye contact with the viewer, certain phrases, etc. So he hired people to help him, one of them being me. And he gave me 45 MP4 files of different lengths that I needed to watch and code. It may sound fun, but it's incredibly boring. It took me weeks. I would try to pay attention, but they're all so badly produced and acted, and they're all essentially the same. You also have to watch them more than once in order to make sure that you didn't miss anything you were supposed to note. This was around Thanksgiving, so I went home to visit my parents and I brought my laptop with me because I'd figured I'd work on it at night. But I fell asleep while one of the videos was playing. My mom came in to wake me and freaked out. It's such a weird situation that I didn't bother explaining anything. I just let her yell at me and we never talked about it again. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.